Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make this hexy star design that I've just come up with as a Christmas motif decoration. So it's similar to the bunting that I've just done recently, the triangle, but this time we're going to make a hexagon using the granny stitch to start with. So middle colour is orange, slip knot, and chain 4. Join to form the loop. So I'm using a number 5mm hook and double knitting cotton yarn, 100% cotton. Okay, so just join that with a slip stitch. So we've got our really tight, tiny little loop there. It is quite tight, but it's important for it to be tight so that we can fit the stitches in, but it also doesn't have a hole or too much of a hole. Right, so we're going to make our first 3 half double crochets. So all I did was join that loop with a slip stitch. I haven't chained. I'm just going straight into doing 3 half doubles. So there's no standing chain substitute stitch for this time, because we're not using double crochet, we're using a shorter stitch to make it a bit more dense and to make that star come out a little bit smaller. Right, so we've done 3 half double crochet. We're going to chain 1. So that's our first cluster of 3, and we need 5 because it's a pentagon. I called it hexy, didn't I? It's a pentagon. Pentastar. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I'm glad I hadn't already named it, because I was going to call it a hexy star, which would have been wrong. Okay, so we've got now 1, 2, 3, chain 1, 2, 3. That's 2 lots. Coming up to 3 lots. 1, 2, 3, and you can see the sides starting to form now because we're using a short stitch. You can see there I've got 3 sides now. Okay, so chain again, another 3, 1, 2, 3. Check our sides again. So yeah, we've got 4 now, so it's looking almost like a granny square. It's looking quite tight, but we will just fit another cluster of 3 in there. Always a good tip is to slide the stitches you've already made around that loop as much as you can, so you don't end up working over the first few stitches and wondering where they've gone. Okay, chain 1 and our last 3 half doubles. 1, 2, 3. Right, so now we can just pull it all into shape. And then in order to join to that last, the very first half double crochet, we're going to chain 1 and then slip stitch into that first half double crochet. So now if we lay it down, it's very, very tight, but you'll see we have a pentagon. Right, so we want to fasten that off now. So fasten that off, leaving a decent length tail for sewing in after. Or if you're going to make this a 2-sided star and join them together, you can leave the ends on the inside, which is always nice, not having to work into sewing all your ends. Right, so we can start in whichever chain space we want. I usually choose the one, not the one that we ended on, because it's just extra fiddly trying to finish off into there. So I'm going to choose this quite loopy one that I made there. Okay, so we've got purple next. So there's different ways to join in a new colour. If you want to use a slip knot, by all means go for it. I'm not a big fan of doing that because I always find it hard to conceal the knot at the base of the loop. And I always feel it looks a little bit messy. But it is an easier way of doing it. And I'm sure people aren't really going to notice it if you do want to do it that way. But can you see how that little knot comes to the front and then you would do your slip stitch to attach? I just find that it annoys me, but you can do it that way. If you prefer, it's less fiddly. So the way that I like to do it is put my hook into the chain space and then leave a decent tail, hook it over the crochet hook and then just pull it through like that. And then obviously the fiddly bit is trying to stop the tail from slipping through. So I'm just going to set that yarn up there. And then I usually just hold with my middle finger and thumb that tail to stop it from slipping through. And if you hold it to the left, you can then wrap it round your next stitch. Okay, so I'm going to do my slip stitch to attach the yarn. And then the first stitch that we're going to do is another half double. So I'm going to yarn over, and as I go through, I'm going to make sure my hook comes under that tail and then pull through and then pull through 3. So that means that that tail now can't escape. It's not that secure, it will need sewing in, but it won't escape now. Okay, so there's a half double. So that's the first half double of 3. 1, 2, 3. And I don't usually wrap any of these other 2 stitches around that tail. I just usually leave it there and then that's enough to sew in. Okay, and then chain 1 and 3 more half doubles into that space. And then we're just going to do like we normally would do with a granny square or the granny triangle. We're going to skip the next 3 and go into that next chain space with our half double crochets. And again, just make sure you pull those together tightly at this section, just so we don't have a big loop or a gap. 1, 2, 3, chain 1, another 3 into there, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're getting our next layer, if you will, of our pentagon. Okay, and then we're going to next miss those next cluster of 3, go into the next chain space, 1, 2, 3, and a chain and another 3. 1, 2, 3. Keep going into that next one. 1, 2, 3. Chain 1. Next group of 3, same space. 1, 2, 3. So we're into our last space now to make that top corner. One, two, three, chain one, one, two, three. Great. Okay, so we're all the way around now. So all that we're left to do is to slip stitch into the first half double crochet and fasten off. So under the V at the top of the stitch, pull it through and slip stitch and fasten off. Right, so we're at our last round now. Slightly more detailed, but still quite simple and straightforward, I think. So that's what you should have now. Nice pentagon. And again, you can start in whichever point you like. So I'm just going to pick that top one and change colour. Right, so I'm going to use red for the last one to match my other star. So I'm going to use my method of joining in the new colour, pull it through, and we're going to start with a half double again. So I just slip stitch it on, yarn over, keep the tail to the side to wrap inside that half double crochet stitch. I can let go of that tail now. And what I like to do here is just pull it across, because this is going to be the bit that we slip stitch to when we come back round here. So this round we're going to do a half double crochet, a double to make that taller point for the point on the star, and then another half double. Okay, and what we'll do next, now out of these three half doubles, the first one you might want to work to is actually tucked right under this cluster of stitches we've just done, and it's pretty tricky to pull it out and work into it. So for this pattern, I'm suggesting we ignore that one and we just go into these two. So we're going to go into these two with a single crochet. So you'll end up with 5 stitches in between each cluster. So we've got 1, 2, single crochet, and then in this middle gap here, I'm going to go into the space instead of the stitch. And I'm actually just going to do a slip stitch because I want to make the star a bit more defined. So this will help to pull in at that point to create, because it was a pentagon, now we want it to look like a star. Okay, so that slip stitch is in that middle gap there. And we're going to repeat this around. So those next 2 stitches, tricky there because that's where the knot is, but I can just see that next stitch there. So another single crochet, so that'd be stitch number 3, and finally stitch 2 single crochet, sorry, that was stitch number 4. So we had single crochet 1, 2, slip stitches 3, single crochet for 4, stitch number 4 and 5, and that's all you need in between each cluster. So now we'll be back to the next chain space. So we're going to do the same thing as the last chain space, and we're going to do half double. Let's get a bit more yarn. And double. Half double. And we go back to this 5 stitches, working into the ones you can easily work into. So a single, single, slip stitch into the big space, 2 more singles, and you're back to making another point. So half double into the chain space, double, half double, and again single, single, slip stitch into the space, single, single, and then off we go again. So I hope you're not getting bored of this. I will just keep reiterating because it does help to learn. Repetition is good for helping to learn. So that was a half double into the chain space, a double, and a half double. And obviously if you've got the gist of it and you're flying around this star now, you can always pause the video or skip this part if you want to. Single, single, slip stitch, single, single, half double into chain space, double, half double. I'm on our last bit now. So single, single, slip stitch into the space, and your last two singles, single, single, and then we can make a nice neat little slip stitch in that first half double of the round. Great. Okay, so our star, which looks a bit more like a flower at the moment because it's not been blocked or pressed. So I'll compare them so you can see the difference. So that's how it's going to look when you've just finished crocheting it, and it's going to be all sort of curly and not sitting flat. And then once you've pressed it or blocked it, you can see the difference. So it's grown quite a bit and it's looking much more star shaped. Okay, so what we need to do with that one now is, I have just pressed this with a steam iron because it's cotton, you can get away with the hottest setting, but make sure there's a front and a back to this. So obviously the back's where all your tail ends are and it doesn't look quite as nice. So always press it on the back because it can leave a bit of a shine to it and flatten it down a bit too much. So do it on the back. Before you do it, just pull each corner of the star to shape it. You don't want to burn your fingers, obviously, so you don't want to be shaping it while you press it. And then, yeah, so go and press it until you've got another one, until it's looking a bit more star shaped, and then you're going to make another one, and then we're going to join them together. And what you can do right at the end with the tail is, when you've slip stitched into that first half double crochet, you can then slip stitch across into the double crochet and then just do one more slip stitch into the loop that's on your hook, and we can pull that up and it'll leave a nice neat hanging loop at the top. So we've got one on one side and one on the other, so that when we've joined the star together we can just tie the top, and that's how you can hang it on your tree. So I've got two stars now. Just going to finish working the ends in, sewing them in, or if you've already secured them quite well, if you use slip knots, you can just trim them so that they're not too long, but don't go too close if you've not really sewn them in, and then they would just be trapped inside. Right, so I've got my two sides now, and I'm going to join them together. So I'm going to find that slip stitch that we made into that gap, which is there. I'm going to put my hook into there. Sorry, I got the wrong one for a sec. and then find the corresponding one on the other side. So we've got single crochet, slip stitch. Might just be a little bit tight to put your hook into. Slip stitches can be. So I hope you caught that on camera. So I've got a slip stitch and slip stitch. My hook's going through both. And then we're going to reattach. I'm going to use another different colour. Put it through. Just secure it like I did last time. So I'm going to work a slip stitch in here because that's where the slip stitch was. Apologies, going off camera. A bit fiddly, but should get there eventually. Split the yarn, I think. No, we're all right. Right, okay, so I've joined in the yarn and I've slip stitched into the both slip stitches. So now I'm going to single crochet into the next 2 lots of single crochet, so obviously back to back. Same again. Sorry. And then we're getting up towards the half double. Tricky where you've slip stitched in to get your hook in there. With a bit of perseverance, it's possible. And then the corresponding stitch on the other side. Okay, so that's looking quite nice and neat now. And then we've got our double. So what we're going to do when we get into that double stitch, double crochet on both sides, we're going to single crochet, and then we're going to do what's called a picot. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want. I'm going to move the hanging loops out of the way. And I'm just going to do it into this last stitch that I've made. So I'm going to do a chain 2. And then I'm going to put my hook into the first of those 2 chains. And I'm going to pull through and then pull through. So just a slip stitch. And that just creates a nice little point on the top of that stitch there. So we'll end up with a nice little point on each stitch. And if you want, you can put a little bell on the end of that. So I've got some bells that I'm going to attach on. Okay, so I'm just going to try and avoid where we made the hanging loop knots there. So I'm going to go into these 2 stitches now. And we're going to carry on with our single crochets. And that's it really. So you just want to join it together. As you can see, it's fiddly. But as long as you line up the corresponding stitches, and as long as you put a slip stitch in where we put a slip stitch in before. So again, we've got 2 single crochets, the first part of that side. And then we've got our slip stitch, which is there. And so we slip stitch that together. And so on. So we're just going to carry on in that way, all the way around, till we've joined it together. And we should have a nice pointy star. Again, we'll need to press it. And then when you're done, we can tie up this loop for hanging. We'll come back to you when we've finished all the way around the edge. Okay, so I'm just going to show you that picot again, now that we're not working into the side that had the slip stitches in. So I've just done my slip stitch there, first single crochet, second single crochet, single crochet into the double, obviously both sides. Okay, and then we're going to single crochet into the half double on both sides, and then I'm going to single crochet into the double on both sides. And we're going to do the picot right on the point of that double crochet. So 1, 2, go into the first of the 2, pull a yarn over, pull through, and then pull that loop through that loop just to create a point. Right, now we're going down the other side, back into the half double and the other half double, single crochet into the single crochet, both sides, and again, and then into that slip stitch, which is always going to be a bit tight to get your hook into. Slip stitch at that point, just so we can keep this star shape nice and defined. Okay, then we're back to singles and so on. So just keep going till you've done that on every point, and I'll come back to finish off. It's looking nice. Right, so I'm just coming back to where I started. So I've got 2 excuse me, single crochet stitches left to do to join it up. And then I'm back to my slip stitch. So I've already slip stitched into there when I started the round, but I'm going to do that again just to finish it off. Easier said than done again. Right, okay, there we go. I've done. Right, so that just needs to be trimmed off and neatened off. And then we're going to press it. So, yeah, it looks much more sturdy and it'll hold its shape better with it being 2 layers. And obviously you've got the nice side of the stitches on both sides of the motif. So I quite like this in the bright colours, but if you prefer more traditional colours, you can use obviously the reds, greens, white, or you can even use metallic. That would look nice. And maybe use little silver or gold bells on each corner. So once I've got the bells, I'm going to show you how to put those on, but for now I'm just going to neaten off my ends, and then I've got this 2 bits of yarn that I can use as a hanging loop. So all I'll do with that is tie the end in a little knot. And that'll be how we hang it up. Or you can obviously make it into bunting and make a few and join them together like I did with the triangle bunting. If you haven't seen that, you can check out my earlier video, which was for the granny triangle bunting. And there we go. So once that's pressed, it's going to look pretty good. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed making these cute stars.